Story 1. Puerto Rico is a beautiful island with amazing people and delicious food. However, the economy, lifestyle issues such as unreliable electricity and water, and a terrible job market make living there challenging unless you are extremely wealthy. Unfortunately, the wealthy are contributing to the island's decline. Story 2. Whenever the question of living anywhere arises on Reddit, the most common answer is New Zealand. However, the top response about New Zealand often mentions that it is expensive and that the job market is not favorable. Story 3. They don't necessarily say beautiful in paradise, but I think people overestimate how enjoyable it is to live in New Orleans. Story 4. Any place that is a desirable tourist destination probably is not ideal for living. Tourists often treat your home like an amusement park rather than a place where people actually live. Story 5. Most of the West Indies and Jamaica fit that description. Many tourists with wealth visit some of the poorest places on Earth. Locals on those islands live in extreme poverty. I was invited to a village by a local I met in St. Lucia. He worked as a water taxi driver at one of the resorts and had managed to save enough money to build a house for himself, his wife, and their newborn. When we arrived at the village, it felt like stepping into a National Geographic documentary. The village had one well in the center and one public bathroom, which was little more than a large outhouse. His new home was a small two-room building with dirt floors, no doors or windows, and no electricity. I had never seen that level of poverty before. I was stunned by the dramatic contrast between the wealthy resorts full of amenities and the impoverished conditions that these locals endured. The saddest part was that there was very little chance for him or his family to escape the dire circumstances in which they lived. Story 6. Hawaii is a beautiful place to live. However, if you don't like mountains or the beach, the cost of living is extremely high, and many people have two jobs, often a regular job along with rideshare work, to make ends meet. Aside from the cost of living, it is indeed a paradise. Unlike Australia, where dangerous wildlife is a concern, Hawaii is so safe that chickens roam freely, and you can often see baby chicks without fear of being harmed. Story 7. Hawaii is a vacation spot, but that does not necessarily mean it is a great place to live. The locals often speculate on how long it will take for a white suburban newcomer from the mainland to move back after arriving. Even though it is technically part of the United States, it can be a culture shock. Life here can feel very slow, isolating, and boring. Story 8. Salem, Massachusetts, is an intriguing city to visit. With approximately 45,000 residents, it attracts around 1 million visitors from August to October. City officials promote the annual event, Haunted Happenings, to the extent that construction has begun to accommodate the influx of tourists. Story 9. South Florida. Everyone moves here thinking it's paradise, but I've seen many of these newcomers' lives deteriorate after relocating here. Story 10. Charleston, South Carolina, used to be a quieter coastal city but has become extremely popular for newcomers. Unfortunately, the infrastructure has not kept up in many instances. If you have to commute for work, it can be a difficult experience. Story 11. Big Sur. I lived there for many years, and it is a beautiful area, but it can be brutal to live in. Between the highway constantly falling into the ocean, the fires, and the tourists, it can be challenging. Story 12. Maldives. It is heaven on earth on the tourist islands. However, it is a very poor and restrictive country with a strong Islamist influence. It has one of the highest rates of support for ISIS percentage-wise. Story 13. Brazil. I grew up in England for a time due to my parents' job assignment. My British school peers were jealous of my move because Brazil is portrayed as a tropical paradise. But when I arrived, it was quite different. To be clear, Brazil does have some of the most beautiful nature, wildlife, and beaches you'll ever see. In that respect, it is a paradise. Its people are also extraordinarily warm, friendly, and have a relaxed attitude toward life compared to the sometimes rigid atmosphere I experience in England. However, I am referring to daily urban life in Brazil. It can be very humid and hot for much of the year, and I often felt as if I couldn't breathe properly. Additionally, there are numerous social and economic issues, including drug problems, litter, teenage pregnancy, violence, organized crime, inequality, power outages, unemployment, low educational standards, poor food quality, contaminated water, inadequate public sanitation, polluted waterways, dangerous roads, and air pollution. All of these factors create a very uncomfortable living situation, and even if you are wealthy, escaping some of these issues is challenging. Story 14, Las Vegas. I won't say it's horrible, but people always told me I was lucky to grow up there. It's fun to visit, I suppose, but it's not really that enjoyable to live in. It's hot, the healthcare is among the worst in the country, and you don't get holidays off because you have to cater to visitors on their holidays. I never got a family Christmas or Thanksgiving growing up because of this. There's not much to do unless you're an adult. Story 15. I'm surprised no one has mentioned Japan here yet. It usually tends to make these kinds of lists. I've been there 4 times, speak the language, have worked there for almost 3 months, and have plenty of friends, both Japanese and foreigners. Even so, I'm not sure I would want to settle there long-term. Japan is definitely great in many ways, but it's also not for everyone. It takes a certain kind of person. Story 16. Cape Breton has kind people and beautiful scenery, but it is difficult to find a job, and housing opportunities are limited. Story 17. Vancouver is a beautiful city. I would never want to live anywhere else, but rent and real estate prices are high. I am fortunate to have bought my house almost 25 years ago, but I don't think my children will ever be able to own a place here, at least until they inherit my house. Story 18. The affordable regions of Mexico. I know 2 couples who moved there and had a seemingly great life. They lived in a nice, fully serviced town surrounded by barbed wire and patrolled by hired security. They had money for quality healthcare, food delivered from somewhat far away, and enough funds to travel regularly. They went 3 years without exploring the surrounding area. The only locals they interacted with were those hired to work in the town. I wonder why they didn't venture out into the area. Story 19. Bahamas. If you are not a tourist, there is not much to do, and everything is very expensive. Story 20. Charleston, South Carolina, is a very beautiful city. It is expensive to live close to the ocean and downtown, and not many can afford it. Public transit is limited, and the infrastructure cannot handle the rapid population growth that has occurred over the past 20 years. Commuting 25 miles to work can take anywhere from 45 minutes to 2 hours, depending on the number of accidents. Downtown is losing its charm as many buildings are being torn down to make way for more hotels that can cost over $500 per night. Local businesses and restaurants struggle to remain open and have difficulty staffing due to low wages and long commutes. The city is slowly becoming more corporatized. For some reason, it consistently ranks as the #1 city in the country by travel magazines. The pay does not match the cost of living. Story 21. Skye, Scotland. Overrun with tourists. Most locals have been priced out of housing. So many of the island's residents are wealthy individuals from England. The driving is nerve-wracking, with people attempting to overtake camper vans at inappropriate times. Camper vans are traveling at about 20 miles per hour around the island. Story 22. Any place you go for getaway weekends over the summer in the Northern Hemisphere is loved by the locals until about October 1st. After that, they prefer not to see visitors until May 1st at the earliest. Most establishments close down, leaving nowhere to stay and nothing to do. If you buy and stay year-round, you will find that you are no longer just summer revenue for them. Instead, you become competition for scarce resources during the off-season. Do not consider looking for a local job. The tight-knit community that once seemed charming is descended from a handful of European families that arrived in 1820. You will never truly fit in. I know someone who learned this the hard way. He and his wife lasted 3 years before they packed up and moved back to their original home. The experience left a bad taste in their mouths, and they avoid places that remind them of what was once their favorite lakeside cabin community. Story 23. Greece's economy is struggling. Houses are nearly impossible to buy, and many foreigners claim it is a beautiful place to live and work. However, these are often influencers with remote jobs or social media positions, promoting the area to encourage others to purchase property. This trend makes it increasingly difficult for Greek citizens to afford homes due to rising prices. Additionally, there are significant issues with unemployment and low salaries. Ultimately, the primary beneficiaries are those influencers who reside on islands like Santorini or Mykonos, often without making any effort to learn the local language or culture. Story 24. Denver is very expensive, and the best activity is visiting the mountains on the weekend, which is also quite costly. Story 25. Traverse City, Michigan. It has some of the most beautiful beaches I have ever been to, good hiking and boating, great local agriculture, a bustling downtown, and a small-town vibe. Housing is often purchased by wealthy retirees as second homes, forcing locals to live far from town, with very little affordable housing for low-wage workers. Traffic is heavy in the summer with inadequate infrastructure to support it. The economy is highly seasonal and winters are long. It seems like a beautiful and pleasant place to live. Story 26. I live on Martha's Vineyard. Horrible is a stretch, but it is difficult to enjoy summer with so many tourists. The housing crisis is brutal here. Story 27. Florida. Many people perceive it as a beautiful beach paradise ideal for retirement. In reality, it is an overpopulated and overdeveloped area that continues to grow. The residents often complain about the situation while simultaneously supporting the leaders driving this development. So it's hard to argue that they don't deserve some of the issues that arise. It's not all bad. It definitely has its advantages, but it's far from a paradise. Story 28. It seems from the comments here that every place has its drawbacks. What is a beautiful place that feels like paradise and is wonderful to live in? Story 29. Hawaii is expensive and small. The locals are kind but prefer to keep to themselves and their communities. Some individuals who identify as locals may hold negative views toward newcomers. I have never encountered so many insects anywhere. Not in India, Uganda, or Australia. Story 30. Rio de Janeiro. Sure, it has nice beaches, carnival, and the Christ statue. However, it is also one of the most violent cities in the world, facing extreme social inequality. Story 31. Scottish Highlands. Beautiful scenery, yes, but in terms of parity with the rest of Scotland, it is very far behind and often forgotten by the government. Over 200,000 people live in an area the size of Belgium, yet we have fewer than 1,000 hospital beds. The rail link has not been significantly upgraded since the 1980s. The main roads in and out are in dire need of widening, but the government is dragging its feet on that as well. This results in a multi-hour trek to the nearest town. Housing is nearly non-existent, with everything either being purchased by people wanting a holiday home or by short-term rental operators. Anything that does become available is not remotely affordable. Essentially, this area has become a dumping ground for individuals with substance abuse issues and other social problems from Glasgow and Edinburgh. The government is unwilling to invest in facilities in these urban areas, so they relocate these individuals to villages up here. As I mentioned, it appears lovely on the surface, but as you delve deeper, you start to think that even the most neglected places would probably be treated better by their own government. Story 32. The Galapagos Islands are a destination where visitors and tourists encounter hotels and tour guides, as well as fellow travelers. The local residents can earn a modest income, but it is often insufficient for a comfortable living. However, just a few blocks away from the main areas in Isabela, Santa Cruz, or San Cristobal, the living conditions for locals can be quite harsh. Many live in shantytowns and inadequate housing, without access to cars, and face high prices for food, most of which needs to be imported from Ecuador. Renting a bike to explore the area reveals that while tourist spots may seem acceptable, the living conditions for many locals can deteriorate quickly. Story 33. City of San Antonio. As soon as anyone hears I'm from there, it's usually followed by, I love San Antonio, it's beautiful, and the river. The reality of living there is that the job market is poor. If you have an advanced degree, you'll be stuck in an entry-level position or making significantly less than your peers. It's very hot for about 10 months of the year with no beach. Getting anywhere in a reasonable amount of time takes 30 to 45 minutes due to the city being spread out, highway dependent, with bus lines as the main mode of transportation. How many different Mexican restaurants does a city actually need? I left 10 years ago and I'm never going back. Did I mention it's very hot? Story 34. Lake Havasu City, Arizona. People love to vacation there. It is a popular spring break and summer fun destination. However, living there can be challenging. It is extremely hot in the summer, and when you reside there, you typically are not on the lake all day unless you are retired. Running a restaurant in town can be difficult due to a mix of tourists who are unfamiliar with the area and local seasonal residents who expect discounts on everything. For those under 21, there are limited activities, leading many young people to develop issues like driving under the influence, substance use problems, or becoming parents by the time they reach 21. Story 35. Azerbaijan is becoming a favorite among tourists. They appreciate the food, hospitality, tourism opportunities, and nature. However, it is important to note that many people are trying to escape the corruption and nepotism that pervade the country, which contribute to rising nationalism and increasing suicide rates. Story 36. Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Oh sure, everyone dreams of living here. But do you know how hard it is to avoid gaining weight when you have constant access to cheese curds that are only an hour or two old and an endless supply of excellent microbrews? Story 37. According to a friend of mine, it's Hawaii. The native population generally has negative feelings towards white people, which is understandable. Food is expensive, and the selection in grocery stores is limited. The areas that are heavily tourist-focused can feel unwelcoming, making it challenging to meet people and make friends. While the weather and views are beautiful, if you're not visiting for a couple's vacation, it can feel quite lonely and monotonous. Story 38. The Oregon coast is spectacularly beautiful. I can't visit without losing myself in its beauty, but it is always damp. Things are expensive, tourists can be annoying, and any good hospital is a long drive away. The southern coast, which is the best part, is incredibly remote. I have family in Brookings, and if the highway gets closed due to fires or mudslides, it can take 6 hours or more to reach a decent-sized town inland. It's mostly retirees living there, making it quite boring for young people. Story 39. Utah. I'm a local, but the cost of living is now very difficult due to wages versus housing. Skiing is no longer a fun hobby because of parking restrictions and costs. National parks are congested, and traffic continues to worsen throughout the state. I don't plan on staying when I have children. Story 40. Norway and Sweden are not horrible places to live, but they are hardly the paradise they are portrayed as. Most people who say they want to live there know little about these countries. Story 41. Likely Japan. I love it there, but all the things I know make it seem like a pretty oppressive place to live if you can't blend in. Story 42. Florida and Southern California are two places that are enjoyable for about a week. Then I am thankful to return home. Story 43. I lived in Sarasota, Florida, for 2 years, near Siesta Key. The entire site should be eliminated completely to ensure safety. Story 44. Cancun is a paradise to visit but can feel like hell for residents. Expensive is an insufficient term to describe the outrageous prices of some services there. Story 45. Manhattan Beach, California, is a beautiful place filled with charming houses and shops. There is a pier with an aquarium at the end, which you may have seen in commercials or movies. Located in Los Angeles, it enjoys plenty of sunny days and stunning beaches. However, the residents tend to be very wealthy and often prefer not to have average individuals living in their community. While they welcome visitors and appreciate tourism, they are less inclined to have others integrate into their everyday lives. Unfortunately, their behavior can overshadow the beauty of the area. Story 46. Ibiza. Yes, it has a laid-back vibe with beautiful sunsets and relaxed people, but it can be misleading. Ibiza is often cold and very humid for 6 months of the year. Availability of goods is limited, prices are high, and accessing healthcare can be challenging. Many residents are transient, and locals may be unapproachable. Story 47. Lake Tahoe is amazingly beautiful. However, the influx of people from the Bay Area has made everything so expensive that it is difficult to afford living there anymore. Traffic is a nightmare from April to November. Additionally, the regulations are quite strict. You cannot cut down a tree on your property without the approval of the local planning authority. Story 48. Any tropical getaway often faces challenges such as low wages, a high cost of living, drug and alcohol addiction, property crime, domestic violence, and sexual abuse. I grew up in Hawaii, which informs my perspective. Story 49. Any Caribbean island. Once you get away from the resort and tourist areas, they are mostly all undesirable places. Story 50. No matter how much American urbanists idealize it, commuting by mass transit in Tokyo can be extremely challenging. It is consistently overcrowded. It is not as punctual as people claim it to be, and you might wonder what is a 5 or 10-minute delay once or twice a week. Well, the entire city and surrounding suburbs are built to rely completely on the train and subway system. Imagine if half the traffic lights in your city shut off for 5 or 10 minutes twice a week. Or if all of them shut down completely every time you experience light snowfall. Moreover, transit radiates like spokes of a wheel out of the city. If you buy a house in the gap between one of those spokes, congratulations, you are stuck with a 2-hour commute on an overcapacity train for the rest of your life, and you still need a car for anything you need to do outside the city. Story 51. Whenever I mention I'm from the United Kingdom, people often say, "Oh, I'd love to go to London." I sigh and think to myself, do they know how expensive that city is and how chaotic it can be? The UK has beautiful sights all over the country, lovely beaches in Cornwall, and picturesque forests and mountains in the north. Yet they only focus on London. Story 52. Any island that was a quaint place to live 50 years ago has now been claimed by the wealthy, making it unaffordable for native islanders and workers, including teachers, who must commute daily. Martha's Vineyard is a notable example. Story 53. San Diego is often considered the nicest city in the United States, but growing up there was challenging. Those without wealthy parents quickly realized they had two options: live a nomadic lifestyle or find a way to move away, as there is little industry and hardly any affordable apartment complexes. Instead, there is an endless sea of incredibly unaffordable single-family homes. I feel that about a third of my high school class became transient drug users, a third moved to cheaper areas, and a third managed to stay by inheriting real estate. I was fortunate enough to move to France, where I could afford a nice, affordable apartment on a modest salary. The metro area was significantly cleaner, traffic was much better, the people were vastly friendlier, and the food was far superior. Additionally, having cloudless 75-degree weather year-round can become tiresome. A little bit of rain is beneficial for the soul. Story 54. Florida was quite appealing 20 to 30 years ago, but the constant influx of individuals relocating from large cities for the suburban, drivable lifestyle has resulted in a sprawling mass of identical subdivisions and strip malls connected by 8-lane highways lined with half-dead palm trees and little walkability. Much of the natural land has been either paved over or privatized, and the beaches are either privatized or perpetually overcrowded. Living near the beach is only feasible for the wealthy, while everyone else faces 1 to 2 hours of traffic just to access the crowded beaches. The only real refuge is the state parks, which the governor is actively trying to develop with condominiums and golf courses. Story 55. Bath, UK. I lived there for 2 years and began to dislike it. The city is situated in a bowl, and it doesn't take long to start complaining about tourists and the self-entitled, arrogant residents living in multi-million-pound houses. The true locals reside in the council estates on top of the hill. Story 56. Every single cruise location on the planet has living conditions for the locals that are horrible, with only the better areas reserved for tourists. I will never go on a cruise. It represents the height of consumer privilege and contributes to human trafficking. Story 57. Kent in the UK, known as the Garden of England, features many castles, a beautiful coastline, and picturesque fields. However, it faces significant challenges, including issues with crime and drug-related activities in some areas, contributing to a sense of danger and neglect in certain neighborhoods. Story 58. San Diego is not a terrible place to live, but it may not live up to expectations. It is a city with many newcomers located on the west coast of the United States. If your primary focus in life is the weather, then it is fantastic, but the area lacks depth. I once heard someone say that living there is like dating someone who is attractive but lacking in substance. Everyone thinks it must be great because of the looks, but eventually you realize there is not much more to offer. Story 59. London is a nice place to visit, but the people I know who have moved there seem to work constantly just to live in a small flat and have no money for any kind of social life. Story 60. Fiji is a beautiful country with a stunning ocean. However, the tourist shops can be overwhelming. If you enter one, you are likely to purchase something. I never discovered what would happen if you didn't buy, so I ended up buying some overpriced souvenirs and left. Story 61. New Orleans has a reputation for being a vibrant city with much to offer, but many aspects are challenging. The cost of living is high compared to wages, and there are significant issues with insurance rates. Story 62. Mexico City. The only livable areas are about 5 neighborhoods where only the wealthy and gentrifiers can afford to live. All those posts you see on Instagram never venture beyond 4 streets and 1 park. Outside of that, there is significant pollution, it is dangerous, there is excessive noise, and it is highly frustrating to be stuck in traffic for more than 90 minutes a day. Story 63. Bali is a place I reckon would be interesting. I visited once and observed how the locals managed to get by. The type of tourists there was overwhelming, as many came solely to get intoxicated and did not treat the people or the island with any respect. Story 64. The Florida Keys are beautiful but very remote, and some of the islands have low populations. They can also be hit hard by storms. Story 65. Up north, there is no work, no doctors, and it is miles away from shopping, movies, and hospitals. If you need milk after 8 p.m., forget it. There is nothing but bars. The trees are beautiful. Story 66. San Diego is very expensive. I am a 27-year-old full-time accountant with a bachelor's degree, and I still live with my parents because I cannot afford my own place. Story 67. As someone who travels between Tokyo and Houston every other year due to family obligations, I find it important to clarify that living in Tokyo is very different from what is often portrayed online. While it is not the worst experience, there are numerous cultural challenges to navigate along with a significant amount of paperwork due to Japan's bureaucratic system. Story 68. I would say Paris primarily because of the Japanese Paris syndrome, which describes the phenomenon where Japanese tourists expect Paris to be a flawless, amazing city and then feel physically ill when their expectations are not met. Story 69. So many great answers already. I thought I'd share a major tourist destination that residents say is actually a wonderful place to live. Las Vegas. Maybe they encourage the locals to say it, but I always ask service staff, rideshare drivers, and others if they enjoy living in Las Vegas, and they almost always respond positively. Apparently, the city offers numerous support programs for residents and sponsors entertainment and events geared towards the local community. Story 70. Florida, especially Central Florida, has a reputation for traffic. People aren't exaggerating when they say it takes an hour to travel from one part of Orlando to another. Story 71. Definitely Bali. It is often marketed as a paradise with its stunning beaches, lush landscapes, and vibrant culture. But living there long-term can be a different story. The traffic is challenging, the infrastructure is lacking, and the cost of living is much higher than expected for the local experience. Additionally, the expatriate community can sometimes be exclusive and isolating. It is a beautiful vacation spot, but not always ideal for daily life. Story 72. The Amalfi Coast is beautiful for a week or two. However, it can be challenging if you are commuting and engaging in regular daily activities. Story 73. Vancouver is often described as an amazing and unique place to live, but the high housing and living costs can be overwhelming. Additionally, the homeless situation here is quite concerning. Story 74. If you are wealthy, it does not matter where you live. You will be fine. The real question is what it is like for the most disadvantaged individuals. And that is a difficult situation everywhere you go. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.